again, lovely people, and today I have returned with another book haul, this time the non-fiction edition.
Sophie Vlogs.
2016 has been my year of non-fiction reading. I haven't actually got through that many, but I have bought them, which counts. It totally counts. It was either my birthday resolutions video or my New Year's resolution videos. I keep making resolutions. I can't keep track of them. In one of them, I did promise to myself that I wanted to continue to learn and grow as a human being and educate myself and all that sort of stuff. So obviously I've just been splurging on non-fiction books, because that's how you educate yourself. You spend all of your money. I have mentioned some non-fiction books in previous book hauls, but this one is just very specifically just dedicated to those. First of all, diving straight in with the book that I am currently reading, and that is Stranger Magic, Charmed States and the Arabian Nights by Marina Warner. I got this book out of Bristol Library, which, if you live in Bristol, is a fantastic library that you should totally join because it has many, many wonderful things in, including this book. As the title would suggest, it looks at the Arabian Nights, and I am only this far in currently. From my current understanding, she's begun by talking about how the Arabian Nights have come to be this entity that we know them as, because obviously when you have a compilation that is made up of lots of individual stories, the individual stories have different sources and have changed over time, and ones we know, like the Aladdin stories, which are one of the best known ones, not necessarily original, whatever that means in this context. The structure that the book is going to take is essentially a series of chapters which at the beginning, one of a story is retold by her, and then she takes the rest of the chapter to analyse that story and what that means in relation to magic in the Arabian Nights. Each story that's told is sort of an example of a specific story type that you get in the Nights, by which I mean, if you strip away all the extraneous plot, what is the basic core structure of that story, and then that's used as an example, and it encompasses a bunch of different tales that are included in the Nights, but it uses that one as an example. It takes the key themes and points from that, and then it analyses those, talking about a variety of things. I feel like I've made a mess of describing this. Essentially, you get a story, you get an analysis of the story, and you're examining that role of magic within there, how it related to the time that it would have been developed in, how it relates to us currently. So it essentially is tracing this history of storytelling and its relation to magic. It's exploring the role that magic has within the Arabian Nights and unpicking that and attitudes towards magic and all of these really super interesting things. If you've seen my review of E.K. Johnston's 1000 Nights, you will know that storytelling is something that I have huge feelings for, and so I'm really excited about this. I am really early on in it, so this might be a mangled description, but if you're interested in the Arabian Nights, if you're interested in storytelling, if you're interested in magic, if you're interested in any of these things, it's quite wonderful so far. Next up, we have an honourable mention to a book that I have currently lent to someone, so I do not have it with me to show you. But I won, from Penguin Platform, a bunch of books recently. If you don't know Penguin Platform, it is a YouTube channel run by Penguin, the publishers, and each month they do a little sum-up video where they give you a couple of details about some books that they're publishing, and if you comment on it then you have the chance to win their books, and I did, and it was super exciting. I'll include a link below so that if you want to do the same you can, but one of the books they sent me was called The Private Life of the Diary, and then it was From Peppies to Tweets or something, there was a subheading. It's by Sally Bailey, and I've read it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a non-fiction book that I expected to be much more serious than it was, by which I mean it was incredibly easy to read. I expected it to be a little bit more academic almost, so a bit drier, but actually it was very engaging. It also was more personal than I thought it would be. It looked at the evolution of the diary, starting from about Samuel Pepys onwards to current day, but then it also was almost like a partial autobiography from the author, because she also traced her personal relationship with diaries and how her relationship has changed as she's gone through different stages of her life, and how other family members had forms of diaries and stuff like this. And I really liked that element. I liked the making it personal. I thought that was really cool. It essentially, each chapter breaks down like a sort of theme of diaries, if you will, and it uses case studies. So there was a lot of focus on Virginia Woolf's writing, on Sylvia Plath's, on Samuel Pepys. There was a lot of case studies to show the examples of that sort of thing, which I found really interesting because these are all writers who I like and I'm interested in, but haven't read any of their diaries from, so that was a nice little insight. My one criticism is that I wish there'd been a little bit more focus on the modern relationships, specifically, in my opinion, in regards to stuff like YouTube and that sort of thing, but that's just because I have a YouTube brain. Because in my opinion, and I know we have a lot of discussions about this on YouTube, I say we, like the YouTube community, whatever that is, but there have been a lot of discussions recently about sense of self and how you project a sense of self onto the world, and is YouTube public or private, and authentic selves, and all of these wonderfully interesting, meaty topics. And I feel like it would have been utterly fantastic if there'd have been some of that incorporated into the book. But that's just me as someone who's really into YouTube thinking that. Said author, who probably doesn't watch YouTube vlogs like me, probably fine. She didn't include it, it's fine. However, I just think that would have been really cool. It was a good book though, I really liked it, as you can tell, because I've lent it to people. The third book is 7 Brief Lessons on Physics by Carlo Rovelli, and I really need you to take a moment to appreciate how utterly beautiful this is. It's so pretty. I needed it. But also, I picked this book up because Lilypad did a review of it on her channel, and I will leave a link to that below and potentially around my face right now. And you know how there are certain booktubers, and they just read and talk about the most interesting books, and you just look at the things they talk about and you're like, where do you find these? These are cool. And she is one of them, and I listened to her review, and then I thought, I'm gonna get that book. And I did, and I read it. Great summary there. I really liked it. I can imagine if you're actually a physicist, maybe you won't like it, because maybe it's a little simplified. As someone who finds physics interesting but has little to no knowledge, I loved it. It's sort of like doing physics in a way that is simple enough for you to understand, complex enough so that you feel like you are learning something, and also just beautifully written so that if you have maybe a more like humanities / literary mind like me, it's a really good way for you to take in that information because you are reading something beautiful. It's just that something beautiful is also teaching you science. And I liked that. I'd be interested to hear someone who has science knowledge's opinion on it. The next book I have not read yet. Finally, one that I haven't read. And that is Philip Marsden's Rising Ground, A Search for the Spirit of Place. If you like the booktube community, you're probably very familiar with Lena from Just Kiss My Frog because she is amazing and she does the most amazing videos, the most amazing book recs, and I want to be her friend like so desperately, but I'm not cool enough. Got a bit too personal there. However, she does amazing videos, and she did a video with Kate Morton, who is an author who I've only read one book of, but loved said book. And they were talking about their summer reads, and they were giving book recommendations. And Kate Morton, this was the first book she talked about, because they were in Cornwall, and they were talking about Cornwall, and this is all about Cornwall, and I thought to myself, Sophie, you need this. From what I gather, it uses Cornwall as a case study for examining how you build up a sense of a place, if that makes sense. So you know how Cornwall has sort of a cultural identity. When you think of Cornwall, there are very certain things that you think of. And it's all looking about how that sense builds up over time, and it sort of traces it from ancient times to now, and that's all I really know, because I didn't really want to spoil any of it for myself, but I think it sounds fascinating, because I love Cornwall anyway. I spent a lot of my childhood on holiday in Cornwall. I'm also attempting to slightly learn Curnow, which is the Cornish language, because I think it's a real shame to have native languages go out of being spoken, and although I am not Cornish, I still think preserving languages is a really good thing, so I'm attempting at the edges to pick up a bit of Curnow so that I can do my bit to keep languages alive. And languages which I have some form of connection with would be good, and I can't do Welsh because they do rolling R's, and I Bristolian. Curnow suits me so much more. Listen to that hard R. Curnow. But yes, so I'm interested in Cornwall. I've spent a lot of time in Cornwall. I think it's lovely. And so I'm really interested to learn more about it and to read this case study and to look at how we create a culture of place. Next up we have some letters. This is Violet to Vita, the letters of Violet Trefusis to Vita Sackville-West. Vita Sackville-West is obviously a writer in her own right, but she has this passionate love affair with Violet, and they wrote each other all these letters, and they were actually forcibly separated from each other in, I think it was like 1921, and they were like sent back to their families. But they wrote each other all these passionate letters, and unfortunately Vita's to Violet's were destroyed by Violet's husband, but Violet's to Vita's were kept and preserved, so we have one half of their correspondence. And I've read a couple of these letters before, and they are like the most passionate love things ever. Like, it's potentially a form of passion which I don't know if I can connect with personally, because I don't think I feel things like that. But I'm really interested to read them and to get a greater sense of this relationship, and also, you know, historical same-sex relationships. Let's not pretend like they didn't exist. So, yeah. On a very related note to that, we have Odd Girls and Twilight Lovers, A History of Lesbian Life in 20th Century America by Lillian Faderman, which I saw recommended somewhere, I cannot for the life of me remember where, but it essentially looks at, I think, each decade of like the late 19th century onwards, and it sort of traces the development of female same-sex relationships. I don't know anything else than that. I don't know if this is going to be dated when I read it. I don't know if this is going to be just incredibly interesting, but I think it's really good to undo that erasure of LGBTQ plus history that has happened, because, you know, dominant narratives and dominant voices tend to take over our idea of history, so it can be very easy to look back and think that this history doesn't exist, when in actuality it did, and people were still living those lives, and in some cases recording them. So I'm really interested to see what this is going to be like. It's got a lot of mixed media, so there's journals, there's interviews, there's that sort of thing, and I think it's going to be really interesting study. So I will potentially report back once I'm done. Finally, we have H is for Hawk by Helen MacDonald, which I again know very little about other than the fact that a wonderful friend recommended it to me very strongly, and I trust her judgment of books. I gather it's about the author's life, and she really, really wanted a hawk when she was a child, and then her father dies, and whilst she's dealing with that grief, she buys herself a hawk, and she trains the hawk. And it's sort of about training the hawk and learning to cope with that grief, and I think it's going to be quite emotional and quite like an experience to read. But my friend said it was absolutely amazing, and she couldn't stop recommending it to me, so I'm going to go in just with that as my base knowledge, and I'm going to see what it's like, and I'm sure it's going to be great, because I've heard good things. It's one of those books you know about but you've never really picked up, and finally I have picked it up. So that's it, really. That's just my little non-fiction book haul. If you have any non-fiction recommendations, I would really, really love to hear them, because I am trying to read more non-fiction and just keep learning. I know you can learn through reading fiction, but I'm just trying to make sure I'm really, like, continuing to build on interests I have and also find new ones. Don't want to become like a stale bread roll of a human being. So yes, I hope if you have been thinking of checking any of these books out, you might join me and read them with me, and we could have fascinating conversations about them. Otherwise, if you have recommendations, give them to me, or just if you have thoughts on them, if you've read them, that would be great. I hope you're having the most super duper fabulous, lovely, lovely day, and I'm sure I'll be back again soon with another thing about books.